I am Beardmohbox, and these are 10 players that should have made the top 100 players of 2016, or at least in my opinion. A couple of things before I get started. Obviously this is a list of 100 players, and in all honesty I wouldn't be able to find 10 players that shouldn't be in it to make space for the players I'm going to mention. The problem with the top 100 players series is that every year it's a complete mess. You never know whether players are voting for who they think will be good next year, which is what it's supposed to be, who they thought was the best this year, or just who they think is the best player, period. So think of this as a 10 players to look out for that could have made the list, and I'm going to go over these in no particular order. There was actually an official release of the numbers 110 through 101, but I made this list before that video, so if I mention players that were in the top 110, then I will put their official rank on the screen, and if I don't mention players that did make it, I'll go over those at the end too. So we start with Jarrell Casey, defensive tackle for the Tennessee Titans. Consistently underrated, Casey finally went to the Pro Bowl this year after rejecting the invitation as an alternate 2 years in a row. Playing in a 3-4 scheme and listed by some as a defensive end, but by the Titans as a defensive tackle, Casey got 10.5 sacks in that position 2 seasons before he made the Pro Bowl this year after getting less sacks and tackles over more games. A similar player in Mike Daniels, who was equally as underrated, did finally make it into the top 100 this year, but didn't make the Pro Bowl. Then we have Anthony Barr, outside linebacker for the Minnesota Vikings. Maybe it's because he hasn't played a full 16 game season, or because he's a 4-3 outside linebacker and doesn't get the glamorous stats, but in my opinion, Barr should definitely be on this list, and I'd go as far as to name a couple of people he could replace. I mean, I'm not actually going to do that, but my point is, I couldn't very easily do that for some of the other guys on this list. He made the Pro Bowl this year and could have made it in his rookie year too, getting better numbers in less games. Malcolm Jenkins, free safety, Philadelphia Eagles. The theme right now seems to be guys who made it to the Pro Bowl for the first time this year. Whether it's supposed to be about who will be great next year or not, the top 100 list is always influenced by the previous season, and Jenkins put together quite the resume. 109 tackles, 2 interceptions, one of which was a 99-yard touchdown, and 3 forced fumbles. Not that it's about numbers, but those are significantly better numbers than Harrison Smith, who came in at number 73 on the list and deserved to be there. And sure, it was only 2 interceptions, but the 2 guys he picked off were Cam Newton and Tom Brady. Then we have Jamie Collins, outside linebacker for the New England Patriots. Collins is the best of at least 4 Patriots defenders that could have made the list, the other 3 being Devin McCourty, Dante Hightower, and Malcolm Butler. Collins is an athletic freak who doesn't move like he's 6'3" and 250 pounds. In 12 games, he racked up 89 tackles, 5.5 sacks, an interception, and 5 forced fumbles. A lot of players in the league would take those numbers after a full 16 games. Mike Evans, wide receiver, Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I think the only reason Evans didn't make it in this year, despite making it last year, is because he only scored 3 touchdowns instead of 12. He did, however, have more catches, more yards, and a better yards per reception average. Jarvis Landry made it in with 4 touchdowns, and his quarterback wasn't even a rookie. Jameis Winston will likely only get better next year, and with that, so should Evans. Another second-year player, Jason Verrett, cornerback for the San Diego Chargers. Verrett is yet to fully fulfill his potential in the NFL, and he's already one of the better corners, perhaps underrated because he's only played 20 games in 2 seasons, but he stepped up last year and likely will again next year. Now, say what you want about Pro Football Focus, but one thing is true. They are absolutely awful at rating cornerbacks, but they did write an interesting piece on Verrett, stepping up as one of the best in the league in 2016, and I've linked that below. Past the halfway mark, Matt Ryan, quarterback Atlanta Falcons. If Andy Dalton makes the list, then Matt Ryan should. I feel like Ryan is always forgotten about when people talk about the better quarterbacks in the league. Ryan has quietly been consistent on a less than consistent team and hasn't passed for less than 4,100 yards since 2011. Ryan had a down year last year, but still ranked 3rd in completions, 8th in completion percentage, and 5th in yards. I'm sure he'll be back next year. One of my biggest surprises, Amari Cooper, wide receiver, Oakland Raiders. His quarterback just snuck in at 100, but I was really surprised when Cooper didn't make it. The lowest ranked receiver on the list was Jarvis Landry, who did have a lot more receptions than Cooper, but only 80 more yards, almost 5 less yards per reception and 2 less touchdowns. That's not saying Landry shouldn't be on the list, but how did Cooper, who only will get better as his relationship with Carr grows, not make the cut? Jameis Winston, quarterback, Tampa Bay Buccaneers. 2 years ago, Nick Foles made the list. This year, after passing for over 4,000 yards and scoring 28 touchdowns, Winston did not. Had Mariota stayed healthy, I may have made a case for him too, but how are people not expecting Winston to step up next year and become one of the best players in the league? Arguably, Winston put together a better rookie campaign than Luck, who debuted on the list at number 23. They scored the same number of touchdowns, Winston threw less interceptions and had a better completion percentage. Granted, the Colts went 11-5, whereas the Bucs went 6-10, and I wouldn't actually argue that Winston was better than Luck, but altogether it's a solid case for Winston to be on this list. And finally, we have Cameron Wake and Eric Weddle and Robert Quinn and Jordy Nelson. The last spot is reserved for a bunch of players that should have made the list, or could have made the list. Weddle had a bad year in every sense of the word and is in a great position to bounce back with the Ravens. Quinn was on course for another 10-sack season, as was Wake, who had 7 sacks in as many games, and Nelson, you could argue, deserved the Peyton Manning treatment. When Manning missed the entire season, he still made the list, and there's close to no doubt that Nelson will come back and make a huge difference to the Packers. These last 4 players show that the list is just as much about what you did last year as it is about what you'll do next year. Even on last year's performance, Cameron Wake should have made the list. So the players I didn't mention that were in the top 110, and I do recognize the irony of me making a video about people being left out and leaving people out, were 110 Connor Barwin, 108 Stephen Gostkowski, 106 Tyler Lockett, 104 Vontae Davis, and 102 T.Y. Hilton. Like I said at the start, I'm aware that really this is a pointless exercise as there are only 100 spaces, and I could only really argue for about 3 of these players to replace people already on the list. I think it would make slightly more sense if they just made the list about who the best players were that season, as that's what it is about 80% of the time anyway, just with the rule that no retired players can make the list.